The Battle of Okehazama was fought in the Sengoku period, a period in which Japan was fragmented into many small and warring states. Oda Nobunaga was 27 at the time of the battle. He was lord of Owari province, where the battle took place near Owari's eastern border in the small mountain village of Okehazama. By the time of the battle, Nobunaga's unconventional ideas had already earned him the nickname of Owari's idiot. Over the course of his life, however, Nobunaga's strong leadership impressed deep and innovative changes into the fabric of Japan. Nobunaga's family crest, the cross-section of a cucumber, symbolized fertility and was traditionally given to royal carpenters. Imagawa Yoshimoto was 41 at the time of the battle. He was lord of Suruga, Totomi, and Mikawa provinces, and he was Nobunaga's neighbor to the east. He was a skillful governor and was known as the best archer of the Tokaido region. By the time of the battle, he had built a golden age for his provinces. As Yoshimoto shared a lineage with the shogun, he also shared the shogun's crest and was permitted to ride a litter. But he was better known by another crest, a crest whose design was based on an oracle many generations prior, where the Imagawa family was seen to advance with a red bird. In Old Japanese, comb has the same pronunciation as red bird. Tokugawa Ieyasu was 19 at the time of the battle. He was the prince of Mikawa province, a province that was under Yoshimoto's rule. He fought in the Battle of Okehazama as Yoshimoto's hostage. Ieyasu had a different name at the time of the battle, Matsudaira Motoyasu. After much patience and decades after the battle, he became shogun. Because of his perseverance and sneakiness, people called him tanuki, which translates to raccoon dog and is similar to calling someone a sly fox. His family crest is an arrowhead-shaped leaf representing wild ginger, which is known to be a very tough plant. This story has been drawn from an important historical text called the Shinchoki, of which there are two versions, both written at the same time, but by two different authors. The first version of the Shinchoki was written by Ota Gyuichi. Gyuichi began his career as an infantryman, but was soon assigned the position of scribe. He was obsessive in his note-taking. His writing was sincere and accurate, especially from a military perspective. Only a few copies of his work were made, and all of them were transcribed by hand. The second version of the Shinchoki was written by Oze Hoan. Hoan worked as a doctor and as a Confucianist. He rewrote Gyuichi's work, embellishing it and making it available for a more general audience. Hoan also criticized Gyuichi's lack of creativity, calling his work simple, saying that it was only concerned with tracing the facts. Generally, to distinguish between the two Shinchokis, Gyuichi's records are called Shinchō Kō Ki, ko meaning official. However, despite being thought of as official now, Gyuichi's documents were long held in less esteem. In contrast, Hoan's work was highly appreciated by people as war tales. Here, most of this story has been drawn from Gyuichi's records. "9 years before the Battle of Okehazama. The Oda clan was in the throes of secession disputes. Oda Nobunaga, who was called Owari's idiot, couldn't build trust in his clan.
His brothers and relatives staged rebellions one after another. During this time, his father-in-law was murdered by his brother-in-law, and Nobunaga lost an alliance with his neighbor, the Saito clan. Meanwhile, Imagawa Yoshimoto, the best archer of the Tokaido region, negotiated a triple alliance with his neighbors to the east, the Hojo and Takeda clans. This alliance gave all three territories a respite from their ongoing conflicts and permitted Yoshimoto to focus his energies on expanding his territory to the west. While Nobunaga was still dealing with multiple rebellions in his territories, Imagawa Yoshimoto took advantage of the chaos to take Odaka Castle as well as a few other neighboring castles by force. This endangered Oda Nobunaga's lifeline, the Atsuta port, and laid the groundwork for years of battle as Oda Nobunaga and Imagawa Yoshimoto each sought to gain control of this territory. In 1559, 1 year before the Battle of Okehazama, Nobunaga strategically constructed 5 forts around Odaka Castle in order to help him win it back. Once the forts were completed, they were immediately put to use and Odaka Castle was cut off from its supply lines. In 1560, 7 days before the Battle of Okehazama, Odaka Castle was still under siege. Yoshimoto and his army left Sumpu, currently Shizuoka City, and headed west to Odaka Castle, which is just an hour's walk from Okehazama. Having traveled for 5 days, Yoshimoto arrives at Kutsukake Castle, just on the other side of Okehazama. The next day, the eve of the battle, Tokugawa Ieyasu, Yoshimoto's hostage, advances overnight with reinforcements, delivering provisions to Odaka Castle. On May 19th, the day of the battle, at 3 a.m., Tokugawa Ieyasu starts attacking Marune and Washizu forts, both newly constructed by Nobunaga as a first step towards reclaiming Odaka Castle. That very night, Nobunaga receives news of the attacks and jumps up in his bed. He dances before heading to battle. It's unclear why Nobunaga dances, maybe to calm himself, but it is well documented that he dances his favorite dance, Atsumori. At 4 a.m., Nobunaga and 5 of his guards leave home by horse and ride to Atsuta Shrine, 12 kilometers away. Four hours later, at 8 a.m., he arrives and gathers his soldiers. Together they pray for victory. At 10 a.m., Yoshimoto rides on a lacquered litter, surrounded by his army, heading westward to Odaka Castle. To the east, Nobunaga's army gathers at Senjoshi Fort. Meanwhile, Marune and Washizu forts fall. After Yoshimoto hears this news, he stops in Okehazama to rest. He takes a moment for himself and sings a few songs. Let's pause quickly and examine how the battle might have occurred. The deployment of Yoshimoto's army is not made explicit in the records. In fact, the exact location of the Battle of Okehazama is still a mystery. Some historians believe, for geographical reasons, that Yoshimoto occupied the top of Mount Okehazama. In this case, the battlefield would have been at the foot of the mountain. There are a great number of landmarks in the area, and all of them allege to be the specific sites of moments within the battle. Differences between the Shinchokī and the Shinchō Kō Ki have helped give rise to two main theories. The long-accepted detour surprise theory helps explain the uneven matching of both armies by introducing a surprise attack. Conversely, the frontal attack theory is rooted in more objective records from the period. When Nobunaga saw smoke billowing from Marune and Washizu forts, he may have surmised that, as Yoshimoto commanded his exhausted soldiers from a distance, he would be vulnerable to an attack. Okay, now we can unpause. At 11 a.m., dismissing opposition from his subordinates, Nobunaga leads his 2,000-strong army to the front lines at Nakashima Fort. Nobunaga's army advances on a narrow path through the rice fields. He leaves 500 garrisons at Zenshoji Fort. Around 12 p.m., Nobunaga receives precious information that Yoshimoto is resting at Mount Okehazama. According to Juan's Shinchoki, this act of espionage later receives more accolades than any other military exploit, placing a higher value on information than on any other contribution to the Battle of Okehazama. With this information in hand, Nobunaga advances towards Mount Okehazama. He sends part of his army to attack Yoshimoto's vanguards, which results in the loss of 300 of his soldiers. Some historians now believe that this suicide mission may have been a decoy, as it allowed Nobunaga and the remainder of his army to advance southeast unimpeded. At 1 p.m., it suddenly begins to rain and hail. This hinders visibility, and a few trees fall to the east. Yoshimoto's army is overconfident, dispersing from the battlefield and looting as though the battle is already won. All the while, Nobunaga's soldiers advance among them, unnoticed. This scene is described in the Koyogunkan records. As the rain stops, Nobunaga confronts Yoshimoto and his 5,000-strong army. It's an unexpected frontal assault, and confusion spreads throughout Yoshimoto's army. At 2 p.m., Yoshimoto abandons his litter and retreats to the west with 300 of his remaining guards. But Yoshimoto does not find safety. He's speared by Hattori Kazutada. Fighting back, Yoshimoto cuts Hattori's leg. Then he's held down and beheaded by Mori Yoshikatsu. In the Kaisei Mikawa Gofudoki, Tokugawa's record, as Yoshimoto is beheaded, he bites off Mori's left finger. Yoshimoto's army lost many generals. No one continued fighting except Okabe Motonobu, who valiantly protected Narumi Castle against siege. But even Okabe eventually capitulated in exchange for Yoshimoto's body. Tokugawa Ieyasu, who had been Yoshimoto's hostage, went back to his home in Okazaki. He asked Yoshimoto's son for permission to avenge his father's death, but this request was denied. Having fulfilled his duty to Yoshimoto, Ieyasu now felt free to live independently from the Imagawa clan. Help motivate us to make more videos by liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching!